All right, viewers, welcome to another episode from Anything About Everything. And today I have one of my most favorite professor, Dr. Andrew Gold, who has inspired me a lot in my life. He was one of the first professors that I took management classes with at University of Tampa, and his classes were mind blowing. And in between the podcast, I'll ask him about the classes, why he did the activities that he did in classes. It was amazing. All of my fellow mates used to look forward to attend his classes. Dr. Gold, thanks for coming over and thanks for doing this for me.
Oh my gosh, Raghu, it is so exciting to see you again. I miss you. You are by far like my favorite student. You went above and beyond just the classroom work and never said no to any of my crazy ideas about getting out into the community and doing cool things. So I'll forever be indebted to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It means a lot coming from you. To start off with, Dr. Gold, I still remember like the story that you said, how you were working at Wall Street and how that kind of changed your life significantly with few events that you went through. Can we talk about that just the same way that we spoke about in our first class?
Sure. So I think I should probably dial back a little bit before working on Wall Street. It's an interesting story. You can edit it out if you want to, but I'll share it anyways. So it's a story that speaks to the randomness in life and serendipity, which is something we spoke a lot about in class. So, these unexpected things that happen in life that kind of pivot you into a certain direction, we often don't think about those things, but we should because they help understand our life path a lot more clearly. So for me, the biggest thing was when I was in eighth grade in New York City, I was zoned for high school in Manhattan, which was not a very good high school. It was called Brandeis High School. And my parents didn't have the financial means to send me to private school. So I was headed to this high school. And I remember being really scared about it. I wasn't like a tough kid. Back then, I used to have long hair. I played the drums. I was, one of those kind of people. But in New York City, there were three really good high schools that you needed to take an exam for. One is called Stuyvesant High School. The other is Bronx Science, and the third is Brooklyn Tech. So I take this test. I was a bad test taker. I happened to have scored well enough, much to my surprise, to go to any one of the three schools. There were different cutoff points. So I had two friends that were in a similar situation as me, and we immediately eliminated Bronx Science because that's in the borough of the Bronx. And my friends and I are lifelong New York Mets baseball fans. And the Mets are, of course, from Queens. And we didn't want to listen to obnoxious Yankees fans telling us how bad the Mets were for 4 years of our life. So, really bad reason to eliminate an amazing high school. But that is honestly why we eliminated it. So we were centered on Stuyvesant, which was in Manhattan, really good high school. And then this movie comes out called Saturday Night Fever with John Travolta. If you've never seen it, you should. It's a really good movie, but it takes place in Brooklyn. And he's a working class kid, works in a hardware store. He's into dancing, goes to all these clubs. My friends and I were like, oh my God, there's like a whole scene in Brooklyn going on. We'd spent no time really in Brooklyn. So we thought, that's the place we need to go. There's clubs, there's dancing, there's girls. It's going to be great. So I pick Brooklyn Tech High School. Now, the only reason that that's important is in my freshman year of high school, my English teacher, Mr. Edwards, who turned out, by the way, to be the worst English teacher I could have ever had, taught me to this very day almost everything I know about finance and economics. He was really into trading the stock market. I didn't know that when I first walked in, but I slowly learned that about him. And he kind of took me under his wing, taught me about how to interpret financial stock charts, and learned about the economy and different financial terms. And it was because of him that I pursued my first career out of college on Wall Street. I thought, this is exciting. This is fun. This is interesting. This is something I'd love to do as a career. I didn't really know what I want. Well, I did know what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a rock and roll musician, drummer, but that wasn't going to happen. I wasn't that good at the drums, and I was never in a band good enough for anything close to that. But that was my ultimate aspiration. Wasn't going to happen. So Wall Street was a fallback for me. So I get this job working for a company called Prudential Securities in their research department out of college. It's a junior level position. I worked my way up to become a vice president, a strategist, using exactly what Mr. Edwards had taught me, a technical market analysis, using charts and sentiment to predict the future and trade the market. And I really loved it for a long while. But over time, as I worked longer on Wall Street, encountered different individuals, observed different types of behavior that were really questionable to a large degree, I began to feel like my soul was just getting ripped out of my body. And it was really disconcerting to me, but I didn't know what to do. I made some good money, and that was great. Enjoyed some of the folks that I worked with, but it was soulless work. I mean, my job was basically, Raghu, to make a pile of money bigger each day for other individuals, and I just didn't see a strong life purpose to that. So I left and I went to work with a friend of mine. And you can interrupt me if I'm going too long and you want to ask me
No,
another question.
no, no, go ahead. I love the story.
So I left and I went to work for a friend of mine by the name of David. He had a small, like, IT consulting firm. He helped actually small investment companies set up Bloomberg terminals in their office and get that up and running. And I loved it. Like, technology was just coming on and it seemed kind of cool. And he was a nice guy. So I learned a lot about, like, technology hardware, networking, and back then there was no cloud computing, or really not much cloud computing to speak of. So everybody had like hardwired offices and stuff. So I liked that, and I decided I was going to break out on my own and start my own company. Not really knowing much about entrepreneurship. I'd never taken a class in it. I'd never studied it. My grandfather, Joe, owned a small chain of dry cleaning stores when I was a young child. That was really the only experience I had with small business. And he didn't really teach me much. I just went down there and met his customers and used the cash register. And that was kind of fun for me. But I start this company out of my house. Back then, unlike today, it wasn't cool to like work in your house, and it's sort of like people would say to you, "Oh, you work at your house. You must not really have a real company." Back then it was sort of a tag against you. So I build the company up. I get some clients, small accounting firms, law firms, a couple of architects. Really, all of the clients were 10 or fewer employees. And I myself would go in, install computers, get office networking in place, those sorts of things. And then one day, about a year and a half into the process, a friend of mine calls me by the name of Jeff. And he says, "Hey, Andy, I've got this great lead for you. It's a large nonprofit organization in Midtown Manhattan called Encore Community Services. They've got about 70 employees. Their mission is to help homeless, displaced senior citizens living on the Midtown West Side of Manhattan. They're having all kinds of tech issues. Do you want to go down and meet them?" And I said, "Yes, of course, like any business owner would with an opportunity like that." And he said, "Well, I just have to tell you one thing. This organization is run by nuns. They're very nice women. But I just want to give you a heads up about that." And I acted like, "No problem. Thanks, Jeff." I get off the phone. I start sweating because I happen to be Jewish, which has little to do with the story, except for the fact that I had had like zero interaction with nuns my entire life. I didn't know anything about them other than an old television show that used to be on called The Flying Nun, with this actress, Sally Fields, and she lived at a convent and she magically could fly. I didn't think nuns flew, but I thought maybe they'd be dressed in one of those outfits. And I didn't know what to expect, but I was nervous. And I went down there to 49th Street to St. Malachi's Church, which is where their headquarters was. And I'm greeted by Sister Lillian and Sister Pat and Sister Elizabeth, who are like dear friends of mine today. And these women, they were like these voracious, impact focused business women. I mean, I had never seen anything like that. They upended my life, to be honest with you, Raghu. I mean, they showed me the importance of serving others, and how people that have no one looking out for them need strong advocates in the world. And they were those advocates. And I was just there to kind of work on their tech stuff for like 2.5 days. And every time I would walk by one of the nuns, they would bless me. They'd be, "Oh, bless you, Andy." I was like, "Wow, this is amazing." I've got a client, a pretty large one, and I'm getting blessed constantly by nuns. That can't be a bad thing. So I finish up after about 2.5 days. I'm, really turned on and excited by this work that they're doing. I go back to my home office and I decide not to invoice them. I'm like, you know what? That was really cool. It was worth it for me to just kind of be around that environment. I'm not going to invoice them and just let it go. So about 2 weeks later, I get a phone call from Sister Lillian, and she's mad at me and she's angry, stern. Andy, you haven't invoiced us. We spoke about this when you were here. You've got two young children. You have bills to pay. We're a large nonprofit with a $40 million budget. We can afford to pay you. You need to. She starts lecturing me about business. And I was like, "Okay, Sister Lillian, I'll invoice you. I just thought it was nice." "No, no, no. You need to invoice us or we'll never hire you again." So I was like, "Okay, I'll invoice you." So I begrudgingly invoiced them. And it bothered me. It made me feel like, gosh, how many like small nonprofits are there out there that can't afford IT consulting services but desperately need it? So, like any good entrepreneur like you, I didn't just start serving small nonprofits. I wanted to find out, do they actually need technology consulting services? And like 94% of the people I spoke with did, they just couldn't afford it. So I had to figure out a way to provide IT services for free while at the same time paying all of my bills. And that was how I got involved in social entrepreneurship, and really got to scale the business that I'm most proud of to this day.
Awesome. Thanks for an elaborative story of it. Was pretty amazing, like how you didn't want to invoice, but they forced you to invoice, and how everything turned out. Where did the shift happen between where you were trying to build your own business and you built your own business and then moving towards education? When did that shift happen?
Not for a while. I really, my business, the IT business, I've had my fair share of business failures. So I don't want your audience. I don't know how many people are in your audience, but let's imagine it's millions of people out there. I don't want them to think I'm like this, great business success entrepreneur. I've had plenty of business failures, and we should probably do a whole separate podcast to talk about all of that, because that's probably of greater value to your audience than talking about success. But it took a while. I really was focused on my business, and it was growing rapidly, and that was exciting. We were able to figure out a way to serve nonprofits for free. And it was kind of simple, just get more paying customers. And the more paying customers we got, we could do whatever we wanted with our profits. And we elected to give services away for free to small nonprofits that couldn't afford it. And the more services we gave away for free, the more the small for profit businesses wanted to hire us, because they felt like, wow, by hiring you, we're making the world better. We're not only getting IT consulting services, but you're using some of the money we're paying you with to help another nonprofit that's helping someone in need. And that really makes us feel good. So that's kind of a lesson number two for your audience. And they probably already know this. You've got to be different from other people that are doing what you're doing. And in my case, there were a lot of IT consulting businesses, but at that time, there were none that were giving IT services away for free to nonprofits funded by paying customers. So it took about, I would say, 8 or 9 years, and I got invited by a friend of mine that teaches at Columbia University. He said, I'd never done this. He said, "Hey, do you want to come in and talk to my MBA class about," he called it social entrepreneurship. I had never really heard that term, honestly, before. But yet I was practicing social entrepreneurship for a long while. So I said, sure, I'll come to your class. And I went in there, and there were about 53, 54 students in this room. And I had planned when I went in to tell them about all these mistakes I'd made professionally. I thought, I'm not going to act like I'm a loser, but I'm going to tell them about mistakes because I thought that would be of the greatest value for them at that stage in their lives. So I did that, and they loved it. They were laughing at all of my hardship and all of my disasters, and how people like to hear stories of failure, and if they're presented in a way where it's kind of fun and not painful, even though it was painful, people enjoy that and they learn from that. And I thought I had kind of like an epiphany in that class, and the epiphany was, this is interesting. Maybe my life experience to that point in my life was of value to college students. Maybe I could help some college students not make the many mistakes I've made. So I started to adjunct at a couple of community colleges, a couple of 4-year colleges, got offered a full-time tenure track position in Florida. I was living in New York at the time, but I got offered a position at Hillsborough Community College, which is in your neck of the woods, a large state community college serving about 50,000 students in the Tampa area. So my kids were aging out of college. My wife is a middle school teacher, and we were like, let's go for it. We went down to Florida, not really knowing what Florida was like and all that stuff. We enjoyed our time there. I was able to co-create with a bunch of colleagues. You're part of it. A really amazing experiential entrepreneurship program at Hillsborough Community College. And once I arrived in Tampa, I sort of got plugged in to the entrepreneurship community there, which was at the time, this was back in like 2012 or 2013. It was rather immature, I would say, would be a good way to phrase it. But I got plugged in with some educators. One of them was Rebecca White, Dr. White, over at the University of Tampa, who introduced me to Dr. Susan Steiner. And she was like, OMG, will you teach here as an adjunct? We got these management classes. That would be great. I was like, sure, I'll teach there. It's right down the road from where I live. That's how I met you. And I always wonder, had I said no to Susan, I would have never met you. And I don't think my life would have been as rich as it is today. So I'm really thankful for her to offer me that opportunity.
I think I am indebted to her too. Like I wouldn't have met you and you wouldn't have inspired me like what I do. Like I have a full-time job and at the same time I've always been entrepreneurial and this is one of my ventures out. I have started a few businesses which went belly up too.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, like it all started when I attended your class and one of your classes was about your experiences that you went through. The other one was I think the second or the third class was where you put us in a group of five and then give each one of us like five unique tasks. It's like, okay, you have to go and ask campus security
Yeah.
to tell the funniest joke,
Right.
and you have to go and stand in a place where you cannot stand. Five of you all and should take a photo, and then you show up in Starbucks. I'm gonna buy everyone Starbucks. So these
Exactly.
kind of classes was amazing. And then after buying Starbucks, you used to educate us like why did we do what we did, right? Those were like my first education in India was everything inside the classroom, so I felt like everything that you learn academically should be inside classroom and never outside. But you kind of like opened my brains to it, like saying no, like management class should not be only inside but something that you do in real time. So how did you figure that curriculum out for us? Like how did that come across? How did you
Well, I think because the bulk of my professional career had been in the private sector, I knew one thing. I knew that a lot of the stuff I learned when I got my master's degree and then my doctorate degree, a lot of it had like a theoretical underpinning to it, and there's a lot of value to theories and scholarship and research and all of that. But I always felt like it was disconnected oftentimes from the realities of the world of business. So I thought the best thing I could do for students is to share with them what some of the theoretical foundational building blocks are for understanding management or finance. There isn't a lot of it really for entrepreneurship, although there's some now. But then to get out of the building, so to speak, and apply and test some of this theoretical framework in the real world to see if it actually makes sense. Does it work? Does it not work? Is it just pie in the sky? And that I thought could be a really valuable lesson for students to always question what it is you're reading, what you're being told, to not just accept things at face value as the one way of doing things. It's a way of doing things, and it's not always the best way. Especially today, the workplace, it's so diverse, and when you're involved in a diverse workforce and environment, there are people that come at situations with many different ways of thinking about it, based on their cultural backgrounds, their language, where they're from, how they think and process information. And just because you or me operate in a certain way, it's really insensitive to just kind of barrel through that way and not really leverage the beauty of diversity, and thought, which can be really powerful and actually helps to accelerate innovation, at least in my experience. So I was hoping to give students a chance to learn that.
Got it. I've always meant to ask you this question. Did you get any backlash for your style of teaching because it's very unique? Did you get any backlash in either any of your
I don't think
teaching?
so. I mean, I think a couple of students might have complained to like the dean or somebody. I don't really know. I didn't really care, to be honest with you. I thought that the majority of the students, maybe a strong majority, really enjoyed, getting out of their seats, even in the classroom, standing up and doing stuff in groups. And I'd play music, and it was like a party in our classroom. And it's still that way where I teach today. Students are always caught by surprise, like when they come into this classroom and it's got traditional, rows of seats, and I'm playing Tupac Shakur or something like that, and they're like, "What? Who is this white dude with a jacket on?" And it's like there's a disconnection there right out of the gate, But we make it fun, and I think if you make learning fun, people are more open and receptive to learning. But I will tell you this, Raghu. I will say that I struggled a couple of times with whether or not I wanted to continue as an educator early on, with a lot of the bureaucracy that I was dealing with. And I spoke to this woman at Hillsborough Community College who was retiring, and she said to me, because I was frustrated with students about something, I can't remember what it was. And she said to me, Andy, students will often not remember what you taught them, but they'll always remember what you did for them. And you do a lot for students, and you're really helping to change the lives of many people. Focus on that. And that really changed my life as well. I really pride myself on trying to be there for students, to support them outside of the classroom learning environment, because learning's very passive. If you're not interested, it comes in one ear out the other, so you can pass the exam or get through the course and you never use it again. But if somebody changes your life and is there for you, and we've maintained our relationship virtually through texting, you check in with me periodically, it's beautiful and it's great. That's really where the magic is, and I'm really proud of that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's you said it right. It's always about having fun and learning and being there for each other and building a community. Well, I always say this in my podcast: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together, and you'll definitely go far.
Yeah, yeah, I love
Um,
that.
so switching to a little bit of entrepreneurship, right? I know you have a little bit of a hard stop, but I'll try to
It's
fasten the
okay, no
questions.
worry. We can keep going.
Okay.
This is the good
Okay.
part. We're getting into the good
Okay.
stuff here.
So I want to make this episode like an entrepreneurship crash course. So say if I have an idea, where do I start? How do I start? Is going to college mandatory, or can I start somewhere with I just have an idea and I want to start a business? How would I do that?
So, going to college, taking a course is not mandatory, but I will say that entrepreneurship, in my opinion, is not an inherited skill. It's a learned skill. So, it's something that You either are going to learn the hard way when you jump out of an airplane without a parachute, convinced that you're going to build one cascading down to the earth because your idea is so great. And after you slam into the ground and that really hurts, you realize that was dumb. I'm never going to jump out of an airplane. Or you can take a course or you can watch YouTube videos. And you have to be careful how you curate information that's out there. But there is access to information about it. But I'll give you like 4 or 5 critical things to think about if you want to start a business. And I think these things will help you to not start a business that was doomed to fail. And that, even though you might be disappointed, will help you a great deal in life because it preserves resources for another idea. So, the first thing you have to be able to answer in order to start a business is you have to be able to articulate what exactly the problem is that you've identified. If you can't explain that in a language that other people can understand, don't work on that idea because you're not building a business for yourself to solve a problem in your life. You're hopefully building a business to solve problems in other people's lives. So you've got to be able to clearly explain what the problem is. That's the first thing, or what you think the problem is. The second question you have to answer is whether or not that problem exists in the real world, or is it just in your life, in your head, and something that you've observed, or do other people actually have this problem? So you've got to get out there and you've got to talk to people and find out if the problem that you think is there, or maybe you're experiencing yourself, actually exists. That's number 2. If it's just in your life or something you passively observed, but it's not really out there, why bother going through the hoops of starting a business around a non-problem, right? You don't want to. That's like the worst thing you want to do is solve a non-problem. That's a recipe for disaster. That's number 2. Number 3 is you have to determine whether or not the problem is an annoyance or inconvenience for somebody or a really painful problem. Um, Ideally, think of it through the lens of, is my solution going to be medicine or is it going to be a vitamin? Most people that take vitamins will tell you that vitamins are good to take, and they try to take a 1 a day vitamin every day. But if they miss taking vitamins for a few days or a few weeks, it's not the end of the world. But with medicine, prescribed medicine, if you miss taking medicine, it can have very, very serious effects on a person's health. Ideally, you want to be in a business where you're solving a problem that is extraordinarily painful for somebody in their life. It's something that's presenting a major challenge, and hopefully, your solution is the remedy for that particular challenge. So that's number 3. Is this a painful problem? And if the answer to any one of those 3 so far is no, either keep working on the idea or kill the idea and move on to something else. So, what's the problem? Does it exist in the real world? And is it a painful problem? The fourth thing you want to find out is, are people willing to pay for a solution to that painful problem? Some people might not be. It depends on the price of what that solution is, so you have to know in advance roughly what it's going to cost you to produce this solution. But you don't want to say to somebody, if let's say your idea is a organic food truck because you think there's a limited access for people to eat healthy, reasonably priced organic food. You don't want to go to somebody and say, "Here's my menu with the prices on it. Would you buy this solution?" Because people will say yes, no, yes, no, yes, no to the prices. You want to say, "Here's a description of my food items. How much would you pay for these items?" And let the person tell you what they would pay. And the reason that that's important is, I'm sure you know, Raghu, is if you tell people what something costs, let's say a healthy sandwich is $12, and they're like, "Yeah, I'd buy that for $12." You'll never know if that person was willing to pay $20 for that sandwich, and you've just left $8 on the table. So you've got to find out: are people willing to pay, and are they willing to pay enough to not just cover the cost of making the sandwich, but hopefully a premium above that so I can make money and a living for myself. And I think when you go through that process, it'll help you a lot along the way. And it doesn't take long, by the way, to answer those 4 or 5 questions. It'll help you along the way to recognize I'm in it for the right reason or I'm not. And then, lastly, in my opinion, especially today, it is critically important that your business, like this podcast, has to have a purpose that transcends making money. There has to be something that the public sees in your business that is beyond the exchange of a good or service for money. For the first time in the history of the United States, as one example, the majority of the population are millennials or younger. 52% of the population are millennials or younger. And when you look at millennials, Gen Z, and the youngest generation born 2010 or later, I think referred to as Gen Alpha, you find similarities across those three demographic groups. Number one, they're the most educated generations in history, and you're a testament to that. Number two, they are the most diverse generations in history, and you're also a testament to that. Number three, they are the most inclusive and accepting generations in history. And knowing you the way I know you have a very inclusive mindset. And number four, and probably the most important from a business standpoint, is these generations are the most cause focused generations in history. And you also are a testament to that. So if you're a person thinking about starting a business, all things being equal, if your business does something cool for the world, beyond delivering the solution to your customers of whatever it is you're delivering, you're going to outcompete almost all your other competitors that are just making a solution and not doing anything good for the world. Millennials are willing to switch brands to cause focused brands and pay more for those solutions. And I think that that is transformative. And that's why I'm most optimistic about the future. You know, with all of the short-term noise that we hear in our political discourse and elsewhere, I'm really optimistic about the future because I see the rising tide of consumers. And the rising tide of consumers are not only expecting and asking more of companies, but they're demanding more from companies. And that is going to change the landscape of how business gets done into the future. And that's really exciting. You're going to be part of that.
Awesome. I'm super excited. This can be a, I mean, this is coming from personal experience too. A lot of entrepreneurs say their personal life is always suffering because they're so much focused on the business part of it. What is your advice to balance the personal life and the entrepreneur, like the professional life? And how do you give time to your spouse, your kids when you're doing that? Like, how do you do that? How do you balance it?
That's a hard one because sometimes business can kind of take you away from your family. What I did, which was, I don't know if it was a good idea or not, but when my kids were little, what I did is I volunteered to get involved in youth sports and coach. So I coached little league baseball teams for both of my sons all the way through. That was enormously time consuming for me. Because you have to be there for the games. You know, you got to go over there for practice and you got to show up. And, you know, there's stuff games on Saturday and weeknight games. It was the best thing I ever did because it gave me a lot of time with my children at a very important age. It allowed my children's friends to see me in a different light, a parent to one of their friends in kind of a cool light, like, oh, I would take them out to the diner and we would have fun. Um, and then, if necessary, I would just stay up really late at night after the kids went to bed to get invoicing done, to get work done during hours that didn't disrupt. There's a certain a discipline to being, I think, balanced in life. And that takes a while to kind of learn that, to kind of take the time to step away. I'm very driven, and I'm a New Yorker, fast moving, wanting to kind of do everything in a second. But you do have to slow down sometimes for the sake of your family, because otherwise you miss all these opportunities. And I'm very, very thankful I didn't make that mistake. I know a lot of people do, but I wasn't one of them.
Sometimes even I'm guilty of that, because I work for a startup. It's not startup anymore. It got bought out, but I used to work a lot, and my personal life used to suffer a lot. And I think one of my eye-opening moment was when I was listening to Matthew. I read Matthew McConaughey's book Green Lights,
Yeah, I read
amazing
that
book.
too. It was a good book.
Yeah,
Yeah.
phenomenal book. And then one of the interviews he talks about, I've started journaling too. One of the interviews he talks about, have a journal where you have like five components of your life: professional, personal, friendship, social, like all these things, and make sure you have a debit and credit. So if you see one going too much towards credit, then you have to give more time for it. That's how you balance out. So that kind of opened my mind towards it, and I try to follow that in my journal, like, just make sure like I'm balancing out everything.
Yeah, I love that idea. That was a really good book. I love the chapter about when he went to Australia to study
Oh yeah.
abroad. That was
Yeah.
fantastic. Yeah.
It's amazing how he tells, like, how he mentions, "Oh, this is the city. This is it. You
Yeah,
need
yeah,
to
they
keep
kept
moving."
going, they kept going. Yeah, it was really funny. So the last thing I just want to mention to you is, like, for people that are thinking about starting a business, there's really two other things to just think about. One is that ideas are trumped every single day by execution. So lots of people have ideas for a business, and some of them are good ideas, some of them aren't very good ideas. Very few people actually take action on their ideas. But in the end, the one thing that will differentiate a person, in my view, from being a successful business owner to not being a successful one is their ability to execute their business model effectively and hopefully efficiently. But effectively is more important. You got to kind of get to a goal and hit those goals. You can be really efficient at making something, but it's the wrong thing you're making, and that's not a good business. But I think having the discipline to really focus on execution, or recognizing you're not good at execution and finding a partner to work with you who's really good at executing, can help a great deal. And then for people that just don't have an idea for a business, there's a great thought experiment you can work through, which is to get out a piece of paper, write down on the piece of paper two customer segments or groups of people that you personally self identify with. So I might put in like entrepreneurship college professors as a group, and I might put in, wannabe rock and roll drummers as another group. Then write down two customer segments that you would love to serve and kind of help, a group of people that you know are struggling in some way, shape, or form, and you really want to try to do something to help those individuals. And then come up with one or two problems for each of those four customer segments. So you'll end up with like 6 to 8 problems that exist. You will find that you are infinitely qualified to start a business to solve one of those problems because of your affinity to help a customer segment, or because you are part of a customer segment you've identified as being part of that. It's a great thought experiment to come up with ideas. You'll get excited. You'll be like, wow, I actually do know a lot about entrepreneurship education and the struggles that educators have, and maybe there's a business in that to help other educators to overcome some of those challenges. So that's just a little tip for those people that kind of say, oh, I want to be an entrepreneur, I don't have an idea, to start a business.
That's amazing. I remember I was doing this exercise in our class. It was amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had fun doing the whole process with you. One last question. I know I'm over my time, but one last question. I really need to pick your brain on this. What is your thought on AI and the future of the world with AI, especially with entrepreneurship? What is your thought process on that?
So, I really like AI a lot. I use it a lot. It's not going to go away. And AI is only going to get better over time. So right now, you've got like these hallucination responses that AI will generate because they're pre-coded to want to please the end user. So you ask a question, it's going to give you something back. May not be accurate, but it's going to give you something back. That's going to get better over time. So you have to be mindful that the information you're getting really needs to be checked, because you never want to be in a situation where you're relying on AI data or information for a presentation, let's say, and then you're in front of people that actually know their stuff, and you're just misrepresenting whatever it is because whatever chat GPT you
ChatGPT.
used, he gave you that information. But I use AI as a tool for learning. So for example, one of the things I teach in entrepreneurship is the business model canvas. There's a cool AI platform called Go Zigzag, and you go zigzag. It's free. You might have to like type in your Gmail address, and you type in a business idea that you have. It doesn't have to be very detailed or well thought out. And in about 3 minutes, Go Zigzag creates a populated business model canvas. It creates a pitch for you. It creates 4 different customer segments with questions to ask those customer segments to validate different assumptions you have, and a whole bunch of other things. The cool thing about that is it saves time in having to watch a YouTube video about what's the business model canvas and how does it work. It lets you leapfrog ahead to quickly populate a business model canvas with one of your own ideas, and then kind of take action on that, because action is everything in business. So that's kind of how I use AI right now from a teaching standpoint. But I think it's a great tool, and I'm not afraid of it. And honestly, most educators are probably using it for grading, students' work, for generating some content in the class. And I think it's important to be transparent about that with students. It humanizes you, and probably will develop greater credibility between you and whoever it is you're working with. So don't hide from it. Embrace it, in my opinion, and just cite it. Don't take credit for something that's not yours. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Gold. I really appreciate you coming over and having this episode with me. Not to just say because you're in front of me, but like I said in my journals, you have come across a lot of times how you have influenced my life. And not only me, I know so many friends who I'm in touch with at UT. You have touched their life in a significant way, where we still talk about you, the class that we had with you, and how much fun we used to have with you. Thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for saying that and for inviting me to be on your podcast. And as always, let me know if there's anything I can do for you or any of those other student friends that were in the class. I'm always here to support you guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much,
All
Dr.
right,
Gold.
thank you.